Nrsimha Jai Nrsimha Jai Jai Nrsimha Jagadisha Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Bringa.
So, I'll just read the translation. Just one thing. Generally, devotees have a tendency to say Ato Nrsimha Ho, or Ato Nrsimha Ho. It's Ato Nrsimha Ha, or Ato Nrsimha Ho. Ato Yato Yamita Ato Nrsimha Ha. One devotee used to say it's Ha Ho Ha Ho Ho. No. Ha Ho Ha Ho Ho. Yeah. So I offer my obeisances to Lord Nrsimha, who gives joy to Prahlad Maharaj, and whose nails are like chisels on the stone-like chest of the demon Hiranyakashipu. Lord Nrsimha is here and also there. Wherever I go, Lord Nrsimha is there. He is in the heart and is outside as well. I surrender to Lord Nrsimha, the origin of all things and the supreme refuge. O Keshava, O Lord of the universe, O Lord Hari, who have assumed the form of half man, half lion, all glories to you. Just as one can easily crush a wasp between one's fingernails, so in the same way the body of the wasp-like demon Hiranyakashipu has been ripped apart by the wonderful pointed nails on your beautiful lotus hands. Shri Radha Govinda ki. So this pastime of Lord Nrsimhadev is another one of Krishna's pastimes that enlivens the devotees, and is also gives life for anyone who is suffering in the material world. What's that verse? And so these pastimes of Krishna are there to give us a means to absorb our consciousness in Krishna. So just like Prabhu explains also that in the spiritual world there is no fighting. So there may be mock fighting or fighting between friends. Krishna and the cowherd boys are fighting, but that's fighting between friends. But Prabhupada explains there's no fighting in the spiritual world. So, but the fighting tendency is there in Krishna. So Krishna comes, he appears in this material world to fight. And he fights with very powerful demons. And Hiranyakashipu was an incarnation of, and Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, they are incarnations of Jai and Vijay in the spiritual world. And so they're very, very powerful demons. Actually, Jai and Vijay, they were cursed by the 4 Kumaras, and they could actually choose. Lord Vishnu actually gave them a choice. Whether they could take birth in the material world 3 times as demons, or 7 times as devotees, right? 7 times as devotees. So they chose to take birth 3 times as demons, so that they could go back to the spiritual world quickly. And so Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, then he was killed by Lord Varaha. And we heard the other day, Hiranyaksha means golden eye. Golden eye. Hiranya means gold, and Hiranya and Aksha means eye. And then Hiranyakashipu means one gold and soft bed. One who was basically one who was very much attached to sense gratification. So these were like Hiranyakashipu was like the quintessential demon who was completely out for his own sense gratification, to satisfy his own senses. And he wanted to conquer the whole universe. So, which he had a pretty good effort at doing, because he conquered the heavenly planets, and he took control over the seasons. Even he could control the seasons. He could control the temperature. He could decide exactly what the temperature was that he wanted to have. You know, if he wanted, it's too cold today, you know, he would actually have the temperature reduced. He had the control over that, everything like that. Just imagine the power that he had. And of course he got this. Of course, that power is also there because he was an associate of Krishna in the spiritual world, and in fact he was part of this pastime. So in that sense, he wasn't really a demon. In that sense, he was taking the part of a demon. He was acting as a demon, and. But he was absorbed in Krishna. He was absorbed in Vishnu. There's actually explained in the 7th canto also that Hiranyakashipu was absorbed in Vishnu by it was like a mystic power of absorption in Vishnu. And so that if one is absorbed in Krishna, he will achieve Krishna's association. Even if one is absorbed in Krishna by hatred or enmity, if he becomes absorbed in Krishna, he will ultimately attain Krishna's association. And just like Putana as well, she became Krishna's mother. You know, she became not Krishna's mother, but like she was like a mother-like figure in the spiritual world when she was killed by Krishna. There's one prayer. My mind becomes bewildered, just trying to think of what reward other than you could be found anywhere. You are the embodiment of all benedictions which you bestow upon these residents of the cowherd community of Vrindavan. You have already arranged to give yourself to Putana and her family members. Because she disguised herself as a devotee. So what is left for you to give to these devotees of Vrindavan, whose homes, wealth, friends, dear relations, bodies, children, and very lives and hearts are all dedicated only to you? So, actually, the worst thing is to ignore Krishna, is not to... is to pretend or to treat Krishna in such a way that he doesn't exist. That's the worst thing. So Even if somebody pays attention to Krishna, at least he's acknowledging Krishna's existence, that Krishna is there. But to ignore Krishna and have nothing to do with Krishna whatsoever, that is, because if you were to say that somebody doesn't exist, you don't even exist, then that's very, very hurtful. That's really hurtful. That's even more hurtful in a sense. And then of course Krishna being absolute, when one is absorbed in Krishna, because Krishna is absolute, one gets the same absolute nature as Krishna. So Hiranyakashipu, he was absorbed like that in Vishnu, but of course he wanted to kill Krishna. He wanted to kill Vishnu. And of course this is not recommended. This is not regarded as devotional service. If one wants to kill Krishna, that's not the recommended process. The devotee, he wants to develop his love for Krishna. So in this pastime, there are so many aspects. There is what is shown as the nature of the demon, how he wants to conquer everything, how he wants to be God, how he wants to gain control, and that he will take that control at any expense. He doesn't care what he has to do to get that control. He will kill anyone and everyone to get that control. He doesn't care. Even his own son he wanted to kill. And he certainly tried very hard to kill his own son. And he threw him, and he had him thrown into a huge big pot of boiling oil. He had him trampled by elephants, pierced by weapons of these demons, spears and so many things, thrown off a cliff. It certainly wasn't for the want of trying. He certainly tried very hard to kill his own son. And that's the nature of a demon. He'll do anything for his own sense gratification. And you have people in the world like that. Even now, there are actually people on this planet, if they thought they could get away with it, they would go to any length and kill any amount of people to take control of this planet. There are people around like that. There are people around who would, if they thought they could get away with it, they would, say for example, come into Ireland, and if they thought that they could get control of the whole country, they wouldn't hesitate to kill women, children, anyone and everyone. They'll just annihilate just to gain control. That's a demon. And there's plenty of them around. The whole history of the world is full of this kind of mentality, where you had empires. You've had the British Empire, and they just try to control as much as the planet as they can. You had the Roman Empire. You had the Greek Empire. Alexander the Great. He actually died in India from a fever at the age of 33. Napoleon, again and again, all wanting to control and all prepared to kill and kill and kill and kill and kill just to gain control. So this world is not a very nice place. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, this world is no place for a gentleman. But of course, ultimately, all the demons are defeated because they all have to die, and they all have to reap their own karma. They have to get the reactions for their activities. They don't escape from the ultimate. In other words, they haven't got control over death. They haven't got control over old age. They haven't got control over disease. Ultimately, Krishna, he conquers them at the time of death. They're already conquered. They're conquered by their sin. They haven't got control of their senses. Even though one may conquer the world and the universe, if he can't conquer his senses, he's simply a servant of his own senses. Then Hiranyakashipu has his son Prahlad Maharaj, who is preaching completely against what Hiranyakashipu was trying to do. And Srila Prabhupada would often quote Prahlad Maharaj with great affection. I was listening yesterday how when Srila Prabhupada was staying at Tittenhurst, John Lennon's estate in London, and he was meeting with, he was having a conversation with John Lennon, George Harrison and Yoko Ono, and he starts to recite these verses from Prahlad Maharaj. He says, there's not much light. So Prabhupada recites these verses really devotionally, really puts his heart into it. And he has Yoko Ono, John Lennon and George Harrison sitting in front of him. He says, Matirna Krishna Parata Svatova Vato Bibhadyeta Griha Vatanam Adanta Gobir Vishatam Tamishram Puna Punas Charvananam. Prahlad Maharaj replied, because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress towards hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations towards Krishna are never aroused either by the instructions of others, by their own efforts, or by a combination of both. This is actually Prahlad's instructions to Hiranyakashipu. And when Prabhupada talks about this also, he talks about how Prahlad is completely fearless when he's threatened by Hiranyakashipu. And he calls him, oh, best of the demons. You know, he doesn't say father, he says, oh, best of the demons. He calls him a demon. But Prahlad is not at all afraid to instruct his father. So, the materialistic persons, they repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclination towards Krishna are never aroused either by the instructions of others, or by their own efforts, or by a combination of both. They're too addicted to materialistic life, make progress towards hellish conditions. So, although the materialistic person is trying to be happy, he's definitely gone the wrong way about it, because he cannot. Yehi sangsparshaja boga dukkha yonaya evate ajantavanta kontaya nate shupa ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. Such pleasures have a beginning and end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So the materialistic person, he just makes his life hellish, and he's only chewing what has already been chewed. He's just going over the same thing again and again, the same sex, the same intoxication, the same sense gratification, just again and again and again. And it's just like something that has already been chewed. Like if somebody chews all the nectar out of something, And then all the taste has gone out of it, and he's still chewing it, trying to get some taste out of it. There's actually no taste there. And so, even in sex life, for example, if someone tries to have as much sex as he can, eventually he'll just become sick of it. Because his ability to enjoy, to get some satisfaction from that, it just diminishes. It just gets less and less and less. That's the problem in the material world. And so people say that, like, they think there's some enjoyment from sex life, or they even call it love, refer to it as an expression of love. But if it's an expression of love, with all the sex that's going on in the world, there should be an incredible amount of love as well. Huh? Where's all the love? So if there's love coming from sex, then the whole world should be drowning in love, because there's millions and millions of acts of sex going on all the time. So if that's producing love, where is the love? So the point is, it's actually not producing love. It's actually producing discord, it's producing hatred. And it's producing duality as well. The whole duality between, man and woman, and designations, and it just absorbs one more and more in the bodily conception of life. So it doesn't give happiness. Then the next verse is, Nate vadu swarta gatim hi vishnam darashraya ye bahar arta manina andayadandar upaniyamanas te pisha tantrium urudam nibada. Persons who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life, and who have therefore accepted as their leader or guru a similar blind man attached to external sense objects, cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. As blind men, guided by another blind man, miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men, led by another materially attached man, are bound by the ropes of fruit of labour, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. It's interesting, when I was listening to Prabhupada chanting these verses to George Harrison, John Lennon and Yoko Ono, that's in 1969. Prabhupada, he didn't give them the translation, he just chanted the Sanskrit. Because he was given an example of, he was saying that they were musicians, and this is an example of chanting Sanskrit as a musical language. But how much they actually would have been able to understand. Of course, George Harrison became a devotee. John Lennon at that time basically had... John Lennon would have been about 29 years old at that time. George Harrison would have been about 25. And John Lennon only had, at that time, he didn't know, he had 11 years left. He died at the age of 40. He was shot by a fan. One of his fans shot him when he was coming out of an elevator in some hotel in New York in 1980. And of course he must have had some kind of understanding. I know Satyananda Maharaj quotes one of John Lennon's songs in the Nectarian Ocean of the Holy Name. It says, we all shine on like the moon and the stars and the sun. We all shine on, referring to the spirit soul, how the spirit soul shines on. So he had some kind of, but actually Prabhupada was not very impressed by John Lennon's he was very sort of blatantly in your face materialistic type of person. But he had, obviously he's going to make some kind of progress there, because he allowed the devotees to stay in this place, and he heard something from Prabhupada. Of course, it was also understood, we hear in the Leelamrita, that John Lennon would have been much more open to devotees if he wasn't married to Yoko Ono, because she was completely against Krishna consciousness, and she really kind of influenced him in the wrong way. But and then of course George Harrison, he came forward and engaged in so much service. But anyway, Prabhupada was chanting these slokas, and this is the meaning of those slokas. That if somebody who is materialistic, if they listen to these verses, they will either become they will disagree with it very much, or they will actually listen to it and see how true it is, and then take up spiritual life. But even sometimes people who come to spiritual life, they think that these verses are very, very strong. You know, people who take an interest in Krishna consciousness, they think, oh, hold on a minute, you can't, so this is very general, it's a real generalization. You know, it's not that the whole world is like that. There's nice people in the world, and but these verses are actually describing persons who are very much attached to material life, very much strongly entrapped in material consciousness, of enjoying material life, and they accept as their leader or guru a blind man attached to external senses. So they can't understand that the ultimate goal of life is to return back home, back to Godhead. It's not possible to understand what the ultimate goal of life is. And so people will think that there is some other purpose in life. And it might be even helping humanity. It might be acting as some kind of welfare worker. But actually it's all sense gratification. Because they're thinking, in one place Prabhupada says that Krishna is the ultimate friend, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, but one who is a humanitarian, he is actually thinking that he is the friend of everyone. Not that Krishna is everyone's friend, he's thinking, I'm everyone's friend. So he's actually taking Krishna's place of being everyone's friend. Instead of giving Krishna and saying, this is your friend, Krishna is your friend, he's saying, actually, I'm your friend. So I'm your real friend. I'm a humanitarian. I'm helping you in your disease condition. You know, I'm helping to provide food for your hunger and all these things. Actually, I'm Krishna. I'm your friend. So that's also demoniac. That's the mentality of a demon. It's not the mentality of, and because you can get many very atheistic people who are very concerned with humanitarian work. So, of course, Hiranyakashipu, he wasn't like that at all. He was just really out for his own sense gratification. But then the point is, again, that it's all sense gratification. It's all to do with the body. It's all to do with the false ego. How wonderful I am. And wanting to conquer everything. It's just like in this world also, even the scientists now, they talk about conquering space. You know, they want to conquer everything. I want to conquer space. And even people in, if we hadn't had our eyes open by the pure devotee, we would not be able to see that all this whole scientific endeavour is just a completely materialistic consciousness based on sense gratification. And when people want to conquer space, it's simply a demoniac mentality, which is in competition with God. They're competing with Krishna. They're trying to be Krishna's competitor and just conquer the whole universe. So, like in the Bible, for example, they talk about the Tower of Babel, how they wanted to build this tower to heaven. And it's also written that Ravana, he wanted to build a staircase to heaven. And so that's the nature of a demon. Instead of surrendering to God and understanding that Krishna is supreme and we are his eternal servants, one is trying to conquer everything. And as a result of that, one becomes defeated. Then Naisham Matistavad Urukra Mangrim Sprishad Yanatar Pagamo Yadartaha Mahiyasam Pada Rajobishekam Nishkinchana Nam Na Vrinita Yavat. Unless they smear upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnav, completely freed from material contamination, persons very much inclined towards a materialistic life cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who was glorified for his uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in this way, one can be freed from material contamination. Because actually even I was just thinking, even in religion, now if you take the British Empire, for example, the British went to India and they tried to convert people in India to Christianity, thinking that Christianity was the real religion. But actually, all they were doing was simply lording it over and using their religion to lord it over people in India, with this feeling of superiority. They hadn't got a clue about spiritual life whatsoever. They had no idea about spiritual life. They were just thinking Christianity and being British. It's kind of like they were both kind of in there together. And the reason why they were thinking like that was because they didn't have the mercy of a pure devotee to open their eyes. Because if they had the mercy of a pure devotee, they would have been able to understand spiritual life when they went to India. They would have been able to see what spiritual life is. They would have been able to understand it. The whole spiritual background that was there in India, but they couldn't get it. They just could not get it because they didn't have the mercy of a pure devotee. And if you don't have the mercy of a pure devotee, even if you're religious, you'll just use your religion to whack out other people over the head with it. But people have done all kinds of incredible things in the name of religion. I was just reading recently, actually, there's this Muslim group in Nigeria, Boko Haram, and they've this lunatic who's in charge of this group of gangsters. They're hiding out in Nigeria. They're a Muslim group, and they kidnapped 300 schoolgirls from a school. Teenage girls, and this leader, he says Allah told them to do it. Allah told them to do this, and they've brought them into the forest, into the jungle somewhere where they're all hanging out there. They're telling these schoolgirls that they have to, because most of them are apparently Christian, that they have to renounce Christianity and accept Allah. But then he's also saying that Allah has told him to sell these girls as slaves, just to sell them to the highest bidder or whatever. anyways, these people, they just like, they have no idea what spiritual life is, no idea what's the difference between right and wrong. They're imagining God is telling them so many things because they have no contact with a pure devotee. So they just totally lose the plot altogether. And so this is what Prahlad Maharaj is preaching to his father. He's fearlessly preaching to his father. Then Hiranyakashipu, he becomes really, really angry with Prahlad eventually, and he wants to kill him. Then, of course, we heard that the other day, how he strikes the pillar and says, "Is he here?" And then, actually, at one point, Hiranyakashipu asks Prahlad, "Who has given you this power that you're so fearless to talk to me like this?" And Prahlad says, "The person who has given me the power is the same person who has given you your power. That's the same person. Your power is coming from the same person from which my power is coming. And that is Vishnu." And so Hiranyakashipu wasn't at all happy about that. But that's again the difference between a demon and a devotee. The demon doesn't understand where his power is coming from. He thinks his power is coming from him. So there's prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham niti manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. And Prabhu says in the purport that one who takes credit for his activities, the person who takes credit, that is a symptom of his nescience. It's a symptom of his ignorance. So the demon always takes credit for his own abilities. He thinks that these abilities are my abilities, they're coming from me. I am powerful because, well, this is who I am. I'm the source of this power. And that's the difference between a devotee and a demon, that the devotee understands that whatever power he has, whatever ability he has, it's actually coming by the grace of Krishna. And so the demon, he just becomes more and more puffed up with his own, what he thinks as his power. And as a result of that, he becomes defeated. So, and just like the devotee, he sees that janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvataha chaktva deham prana janma naiti mam eti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not upon leaving the body take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So one who knows that Krishna's appearance and activities is transcendental, then he gets the same transcendental nature as Krishna, and he doesn't come back to this material world. He attains Krishna's eternal abode. And then generally those who don't accept Krishna's appearance, they think that Krishna is some ordinary person, or they think that this is all mythology, that Krishna appearing as a half man, half lion, that this is all mythology. They think, well, how could that be? This person appearing as a half man, half lion. It's just some kind of story that's made up. But I was listening to Prabhu the other day. He was pointing out that none of the acharyas, the great saints in our line who are making commentaries on the scriptures, and they're living lives of purity, free from sinful activity. Their hearts are enlightened by spiritual knowledge. They're full of wisdom. None of these acharyas have ever said that these incarnations of Krishna are mythology. None of them have ever said it. And as Prabhupada would say, who are we going to have our faith in? The acharyas and Krishna, or a loafer like you? Who are we going to listen to? Prabhupada would often say that. So, you're a loafer, Am I going to listen to you when you say that all this is mythology? And what do I gain by listening to you? Am I going to accept you as... Sometimes I would think like that. I remember when I distributing books on the street, and you be in Belfast or something, and you meet some born again Christian or some very materialistic person, and they start kind of preaching to you about how this Krishna consciousness is all nonsense or something like that, and of course you also respond, but then I would often meditate when that person is gone. Would I accept him as my spiritual master? This person who has just spoken. And if I accepted him as my spiritual master, where would that bring me? Where would I end up if I accepted this person as my spiritual master? Where would I end up? What would it bring me? Would it bring me happiness? Would it bring me truth? Would it bring me wisdom? Would it bring me love of God? It wouldn't bring me any of those things. I would just end up being like him, a loafer, a just complete nonsense, foolish person who doesn't know anything about the difference between right and wrong, the absolute truth. Just doesn't know anything because he has no access to wisdom, which is coming from a pure devotee. He wouldn't even know a pure devotee if he saw one sitting in front of him. He wouldn't be able to recognize a pure devotee. He would have no appreciation. So this is a good question to ask. Who are we going to listen to? Who are we going to follow? And you can be sure that many people, they think, all these things, they're all the British as well, when they went to India, they, and they would see, say, Lord Jagannath or something, they'd think, this is obviously completely contrary to God conscious. Someone who has any kind of sense of wisdom or what real God consciousness is. This is total contradiction. They say like Lord Jagannath. So, but again, if you examine their knowledge, if you examine what they actually understand, you actually find that they have a really poor understanding of what's what. And as Juridan Guru Prabhu was pointing out the other day, when we come into this temple, we find it much more pleasing to observe the form of Sri Radha Govinda than to come into a temple or a church and see a pure devotee nailed to a cross. We do not find that very attractive to see somebody nailed to a cross. What kind of a meditation is that? That you can this is supposed to be a meditation, Your spiritual master who saved you, from the material world. How could you tolerate seeing your spiritual master nailed to a cross? How could you tolerate it? It's just completely intolerable to kind of have that kind of a meditation. Where does this come from? There's so many things that are just kind of made up, speculated about. Anyway, this appearance of Krishna is a transcendental appearance. One who understands the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. And tava katam ritam tapta jivanam kavibir idadam srimadatatam sravana mangalam kavibir idadam kalmasapaham Sravana Mangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvigarinantine Ye Burida Jana. The nectar of your words and the descriptions of your activities are the life and soul of those suffering in this material world. These narrations, transmitted by great sages, eradicate one's sinful reactions and bestow good fortune upon whoever hears them. These narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with spiritual power. Certainly those who spread the message of Godhead are most munificent. We hear in the Bhagavatam and the scriptures and how by hearing about Krishna's pastimes has just this amazing effect on the hearer that he actually becomes free from material entanglement. And not only material entanglement, he actually becomes free from birth and death and goes back to the spiritual world. But those who do not understand that, avajananti ma mudha, manushim tanamashratam, param bhava majananto, mama bhuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not understand my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. So when Krishna descends, fools deride him. They don't know who he is. As a result of that consciousness, the mogasha moga karmano, moga jnana vachetasaha, rakshashim asuram chaiva, prakritim mohinam shrita. Those who are thus deluded are attracted by demoniac and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruit of activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So, in other words, there is a result of that mentality. If one has a mentality of deriding Krishna when he appears, or the incarnation of Krishna when he appears, the result of that mentality is that one becomes attracted, all right, to something. They're not attracted to Krishna, but they're attracted to atheistic views. You become attracted to atheistic views. You can see that people who are not attracted to Krishna, they become attracted to atheistic views. As a result of becoming attracted to atheistic views, their culture, their fruit of activities, their culture of knowledge, and their attempts at liberation are all defeated. Everything is defeated. There is no success in the material world. Whatever people try to achieve, whatever material success people try to get, it's all defeated. There's actually nothing there. At the end, no matter how much money you have, whatever you achieve, whatever fame you have, it's all, as Prabhu would say about Napoleon. In France, Prabhu went and he saw Napoleon's statue, and he said, okay, well, here's Napoleon. He said, well, here is France. Here is France, but where's Napoleon? Where's Napoleon now? Nobody knows where Napoleon is. Even Napoleon doesn't even know that he was Napoleon. I mean, he may be in another body, God knows what kind of a body, but he doesn't know that he was one time Napoleon. I read one time that one quote from Napoleon, that in his whole life he never had 3 happy days together in his whole life. At the end he was banished to an island, wasn't it? Of was it St. Helena's or something? He was banished. He died in some kind of prison island. But it's all defeated. So, but those who don't have that mentality, Mahatmanas tu mam parta, diving prakritim asrita, bhajanti ananya manaso, gatva buddha avyayam. Those who are not deluded, the great souls, so they're fully absorbed in Krishna because they know Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. They're fully devoted to Krishna. And what are they doing? Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantas cha dridavataha nastyantas samam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavouring with great determination, bowing down before me. These great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. That's the mentality of somebody who is not deluded. Those who are not deluded, the great souls. That's what they're doing. So we see what those who are deluded, what the result of someone is deluded, is happening to them, and the result of someone who is not deluded, he's engaging in always chanting Krishna's glories. Because actually a demon, he doesn't want to chant Krishna's glories. He is envious of Krishna. I remember talking to an old friend of mine one time, and I said, the problem in this world is people are envious of God. And he said, I'm not envious of God. But then when you think about it, sometimes I have these conversations, and I may say some things, and then I go away and I think about it and come back afterwards. But when you think about it, if somebody is not envious of God, Krishna is the most attractive person. There is no one more attractive than Krishna. There's no one more lovable than Krishna. There's no one more wonderful than Krishna. So how could you live without ever thinking of Krishna? If somebody's living and they never think of Krishna, they never give any time to Krishna, they never try to serve Krishna, they never try to hear about Krishna, they're just completely oblivious to Krishna, what kind of what's going on in a person's heart who has no interest in Krishna? Why would he not be interested in Krishna? Why would he be attracted to so many other things and not to Krishna? Because he's envious. That's why. He said, why does he not love Krishna? Because he's envious. And of course we have to also look at our own hearts. Why are we not completely, totally absorbed in love of Godhead? We also have to admit that we're envious of Krishna. Because actually that is one of the first steps in spiritual life. Anyone who takes the spiritual life, one of the first realizations that he gets is he comes to the admission, actually I'm envious of Krishna. One who is in a complete illusion, he will not actually, many people will not admit that they're envious of Krishna. They think, I'm a nice guy. I'm not the kind of person who's envious of God. I'm a nice person. So there's a lack of consciousness there, a lack of awareness of the state of his own heart. So actually, the more a devotee becomes purified, the more he realizes that he's lacking in his love for Krishna. Because a materialistic person, he couldn't care less whether he loves Krishna or not. It doesn't matter to him. He can take it or leave it. It doesn't mean anything to him whether he loves Krishna or not. But for a devotee, when the devotee realizes he doesn't love Krishna, then he actually finds that this is something which is causing so many problems in his life, so much unhappiness in his life, that he's unhappy because the reason for all these problems in his life is because he doesn't love Krishna. So, but that awareness is coming as a result of purification. So the more a devotee becomes purified, the more he sees that this is actually a real, I must develop my love for Krishna. But part of that is the realization that he has actually spent so much time when he doesn't love Krishna, and even now he's lacking in love for Krishna. And as a result of that, his life is unsuccessful as a result of that. Whereas the materialistic person, he thinks that if he has so many things, he has so many qualities that he gives himself credit for, he has so much money, so much fame, so many things like that, then he thinks his life is successful. But actually it's not. So then Hiranyakashipu, then he was killed by Lord Nrsimhadeva, and as Prabhu talks about that, he says Prahlad, he's actually looking on. He's looking on as his father is being killed by Lord Nrsimhadeva, and he's actually taking pleasure in the fact that his father is being killed by Lord Nrsimhadeva. So Prabhu says, what kind of a son is that? He's taking pleasure and his father's been killed. Of course, his father is a total demon who tried to kill him. So, but then, of course, Prahlad is a pure devotee. So Prahlad is actually a saint. So you're saying, what kind of a saint is that? That he's looking at his father being killed by this extraordinary form of Krishna, and he's feeling pleased. What's saintly about that? There's in normal religions, even if the father is a demon, if the child is saintly, he's not going to take pleasure when the father is killed. But of course, the reason why he's taking pleasure when his father is killed is because he knows that actually this is Krishna that's killing his father. And as a result of Krishna killing his father is going to be liberated from birth and death. And he's going to be free. He's also going to be freed from all his reactions. So, because whatever Krishna does is good. That's something that, again, that a devotee understands and a materialistic person can't understand. That whatever Krishna is doing is good. Krishna is all good. And that the illusion and everything is bad is actually created by the rebellious spirit soul. In other words, there's one lecture that Prabhupada gives. The title as "You, not Krishna, create Maya." We actually create Maya ourselves by our desire, to turn away from Krishna, to be rebellious towards Krishna. We're actually creating a situation, a hellish situation. We're creating the hellish situation. Because Krishna is fulfilling our desire. We're saying we want to be Krishna. But of course we can't be Krishna, but we can only think that we're Krishna under an illusion that we're Krishna, that we're God, that we're trying to pretend that we're God. So as a result of trying to pretend that we're God, Krishna allows us to take control, apparently take control of the whole situation of this material world. That we're in the illusion that we're in control of it. And as a result of, and then he says, okay, let's see how you do. Now you can pretend to be God, and let's see how you do in this situation. And of course, we make a total mess of the whole thing. We just create a complete hell for ourselves and everybody else. So, but Krishna, whatever Krishna is doing, the result is favorable for us to come to the right conclusion, or to come to the point of actually understand, to the point of getting out of the illusion. In fact, this whole material world is arranged in such a way that you're actually eventually forced to get out of the illusion, because you could just be completely baffled in your attempts to control. Prabhupada actually says that in one purport in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, when the living entity is eventually baffled in his attempts to control, then he surrenders to Krishna. But of course, when Hiranyakashipu, he didn't surrender to Krishna. Krishna killed him. And as a result of that, he was liberated. But anyone who comes in contact with Krishna is benefited. And that's why Prabhupada, he would always, even when people who were inimical to Krishna consciousness, he would, people who have spoken maybe in newspapers or written articles against the Krishna consciousness movement, if they actually spoke about Krishna or mentioned Krishna, Prabhupada would actually look at that and say, well, they're mentioning Krishna, therefore they're becoming purified. And they're actually making spiritual advancement. So whoever comes in contact with Krishna, he's making progress in spiritual life, even if he's inimical. And of course, with Hiranyakashipu, he actually became absorbed in Vishnu. So we need to kind of work on how to become absorbed in Krishna also, because we need to develop in our spiritual life to such an extent that we can't not think of Krishna. In the beginning, we have to kind of force ourselves to think of Krishna, but we have to gradually come to a point where we naturally think of Krishna, where we can't not think of Krishna, that we're actually emotionally attached to Krishna to such an extent that we're absorbed in Krishna, just like the gopis are absorbed in Krishna. Their minds absorbed in thoughts of him, they conversed about him, acted out his pastimes, and felt themselves filled with his presence. They completely forgot about their homes as they loudly sang the glories of Krishna's transcendental qualities. The gopis were completely absorbed in Krishna. They couldn't think of anything but Krishna. And when one comes to that point, one becomes intensely emotionally connected with Krishna, because in the process of making advancement in devotional service, the emotions intensify more and more. As we make progress, we become more and more emotionally connected to Krishna. At least, certainly that has to be our concern, that, this is, how is this going to happen? Because when one is emotionally attached to Krishna, then when there's some difficulty or some danger or something, one will automatically turn to Krishna, because one actually goes where one's emotions bring them. And so then the practice of Krishna consciousness leads us to that emotional absorption in Krishna. But Hiranyakashipu was actually emotionally absorbed in Krishna. He was emotionally absorbed. Out of enmity, he was emotionally absorbed. So somehow or other one has to become emotionally absorbed in Krishna. But of course our process is, that is not devotional service, but that absorption in Krishna has actually brought him to the point of Krishna consciousness. But we want to develop our love for Krishna. And that means developing our emotions. That means that we have to try to absorb our minds in Krishna. Initially, when one is chanting, I was listening recently, one chants with the tongue. And what's that's called, I was listening to Bhaktivedanta Swami, he was talking about this. This is called lip service. Service. We're serving Krishna. Lip service. So, and then he says, what kind of chanting is this lip service? You know, it's namaparat. Namaparat is lip service. So we have to get past the lip service so that the mind becomes absorbed, the attention becomes absorbed in Krishna. Then it's no longer lip service means that the tongue is chanting, but the mind is somewhere else. That's lip service. That's namaparat. The tongue is chanting, and the attention is on something else. But the more we can actually think of Krishna and hear about Krishna, then when we chant, gradually our mind will become accustomed to Krishna. But it doesn't happen automatically. We have to work at it. We have to work at remembering Krishna. We have to work at thinking about Krishna. It doesn't happen automatically. It takes practice. And sometimes we even may have to go for a long time before we realize that it doesn't happen automatically. So, but by the mercy of the pure devotee, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, by the mercy of Prahlad Maharaj, we're actually hearing these pastimes. And by hearing these pastimes, we actually develop faith in Krishna. And we develop an attraction to hearing about Krishna, how wonderful Krishna is, and how attractive Krishna is. So, does anyone have any comments or questions?
Sometimes you mentioned that envy of Krishna, that someone is not attracted to Krishna, this must be enviousness. What is the position of those who are religious people, and strongly even they dedicated their whole life to religion, they come in touch with Krishna consciousness, but they feel no attraction whatsoever. They are so much devoted to, let's say, Jesus, and they think this is something else. They don't understand that this is also, well, they don't understand this is actually, and for example, even in Eastern nowadays, people are actually, many people, they take inspiration from for example, Mother Teresa. But she was in Calcutta, she came in touch with Krishna consciousness movement, Lord Chaitanya's movement, but she had no attraction whatsoever to that.
Yeah.
Yet they, she even comes sometimes in books. I recently got a book for children, educational book, where she's among other saints, as an example, given in an ISKCON produced book.
Really?
Yeah. So, but generally, this is one example, but there may be more examples of someone who is, devoted to God in life and sacrificing life in some way, but yet completely no attraction to Krishna.
Yeah,
Or
well,
even rejection of Krishna as something satanic or something like this.
yeah, well, it's unfortunate. You see, there can be a difference. Somebody may be very, how do I put it, spiritual, we say inverted commas, spiritual, or they may be attracted to religious life or attracted to the concept of God. But you see, there's a difference between someone who is inimical. If somebody becomes inimical to Krishna, well, that's obviously offensive, you know. But at the same time, somebody may be on a spiritual path, may not necessarily be offensive to Krishna. He may be just attached to his own path. And so he could be making progress if he's not offensive to Krishna. If he's just attached to his own way. But if somebody's inimical towards Krishna and offensive towards Krishna, then obviously that's it's offensive. But hopefully they'll make some kind of progress by their spiritual practices in some way. But it's not very it's very sectarian. It's very sectarian, you know. And how can someone who is supposed to be on a spiritual platform be sectarian? When they see, you know, I mean, if you read Bhagavad Gita, as Prabhu would often point out, Krishna consciousness is not a sectarian movement. And so when we talk of God, we're saying God is Krishna. And do you know who God is? Do you actually know who God is? If you ask Mother Teresa, do you know who God is? What's his name? What are his activities? What kind of relationships does he have with his devotees in the spiritual world? What's the nature of the spiritual world? What's the nature of the soul? Does an animal have that the animal has a soul? There's a lot of ignorance there. There's a lot of ignorance. There may be some kind of level of piety on a certain level. Whether very caring for people. They may be humanitarians and caring for people in certain situations. But then they're eating meat. I mean, she was eating meat. So that's not very caring to the animals. So, I mean, there's limited. They may make some kind of a gata sukriti, maybe if they come in contact with devotees or they take a book or something like that. Now, from another level, if someone like that did take to Krishna consciousness, if they actually took to Krishna consciousness and accepted Krishna consciousness with the qualities that they have, they could make tremendous spiritual advancement. Because in many ways they practice a lot of austerity. They have a lot of very much like a caring attitude to other people, and taking care of people like that. If you actually had those kind of qualities and you came to Krishna consciousness and you started chanting Hare Krishna, they would be very helpful qualities. But of course, if you don't, then it's not very. Of course, also in the same way, some of these kind of qualities can actually be obstacles too, because if you're attached to helping humanity in a certain way, then you can just become a humanitarian, and then so. But at the same time, things can be mixed. People can be mixed in different ways. I mean, you hear of devotees who join the movement, for example, who at some point would have being offensive to devotees before they joined. I mean, you hear of sometimes the devotees. I've heard in more than a number of cases where somebody may have kicked a devotee on a Harinam party, or even punched a devotee, and then later on became a very serious devotee. I heard about that recently. Some devotee was talking about it was actually a sannyasi that he knew, who was a very serious devotee, who actually punched a devotee on Harinam when he met devotees, and later on became a very serious devotee. So you really don't know what's going on, So, what do you think of that? Is that? There's only a certain amount you can say. And then the four Kumars, who actually cursed Jai and Vijay, so there is a connection to this. They were impersonalists, and so, but they were Brahmavadis. And so, like a Brahmavadi could be attached to the impersonal aspect of Krishna, but he's not offensive to Krishna. He may even know that Krishna is God, but because he's attached to the impersonal aspect, then he's kind of, that's an attachment that he has. But if he's not offensive to Krishna, then he can make progress from the impersonal aspect to the personal. He can make progress like that. So they weren't envious of Krishna. Anything else? Okay. Sringadev Bhagavan ki, Prahlad Maharaj ki.